Well, if you've been paying attention to the car audio world, you know Audison has been a hot topic. Not only have they recently unveiled a brand new Accordo software to really help enhance DSP functionality, but they've got a ton of great hardware to go with. Today, we've got our product specialist, Ken Ward, joining us to talk to us about some of the newest products coming to you from Audison. This is CMA Connected, brought to you by Sirius XM, all about Audison car audio. And it starts now. What's going on, guys, and welcome to another CMA Connected, brought to you by Sirius XM. I'm your host, Ben Wu. We're talking Audison from the folks at Electromedia, that Italian brand that has spent so much time, effort, resources into developing what the industry needs right now. And that is, of course, great products for an amazing sound, whether it's amplifiers, speakers, or DSP. And we're going to be touching a lot of those products today with Ken Ward. Now, Ken, exciting times happening right now for Audison. What are we going to be covering on today's show?
Well, with AF bit amplifiers, we've obviously got BitDrive 2.0 and Accordo, and we're going to talk more about those in the DSP episodes. But we are today going to talk about the new AFM 1.7 bit, as well as some really interesting speaker applications. So let's get started.
All right, Audison hardware coming up, but first, an opportunity for our partner Sirius XM, reminding you why it's always an excellent add-on sale. And when we come back, I got Ken Ward in the studio. Let's talk some Audison. Don't you dare go away.
Hi, Paul Truman here with Sirius XM. We reached out to some of our partners in the industry, and here's what they had to say.
I can't say more or enough about just what it means to have our unit working with Sirius XM. It's like we're there now.
The Sirius XM service is something consumers want, right? So it's Paul.
That allows a consumer to listen to either podcasts, entertainment, sports, all at their fingertips. It's all about engagement, and that's what Sirius XM provides.
Sirius XM is a huge component in a vehicle nowadays. Consumers expect that technology to be available both in our OEM system as well as the aftermarket upgrades that they're applying to their vehicle.
Alpine and Sirius XM, through our electronics, are able to offer the consumer on the aftermarket side Sirius XM 360L, which is an expanded platform for Sirius XM. And it's really been a beneficial relationship for us with Sirius XM.
As a dealer, just remember, we don't compete with anybody else. We are absolutely one of the best profitability accessories you can add to any head unit that is Sirius XM ready.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the show. We're talking Audison car audio with product expert Ken Ward. Now, Ken, I remember talking to you at MasterTech Expo earlier on this year, and you were super excited to unveil this brand new monoblock subwoofer amplifier out of the Forza line. And this time, it was a little bit different. In fact, I'm going to quote you in saying, the most advanced subwoofer amplifier in the world. Here's your opportunity, Ken, to back that statement up.
Yeah, I remember that conversation, Ben, and I'm really happy to get a chance to go into it here. The AFM 1.7 has many, many things that no other subwoofer amplifier has. The first thing is it's a member of the BIT family of amplifiers from AF. And that means that it's got our complete suite of OEM input correction. It's got our complete suite of output adjustments. And it's got the same family of peripherals. So this amplifier really has three core use cases. And we get a lot of questions. Why does this sub-amp have so many inputs? Why does this sub-amp have so many pre-amplified outputs? And the real reason is when we get into the use cases. Number one, you're adding a sub. Now, everybody that's in the car audio business has added a sub that had a lot of thunderous output, but didn't blend well with the cabin speakers, and musically really didn't sound that good. And so our intent with this subwoofer amplifier is we have delay, we have all pass filters, we have EQ, we have all sorts of tools to make sure that your subwoofer stays in phase with the fronts. It has a nice blend and really helps you keep the sub up front. So that's one thing that most subwoofer amplifiers can't do. Number two is because of our 8 inputs and our 4 additional inputs with the optional input card, we can integrate with factory systems up to 12 channels, and we can then give you 6 channels of preamp output for your non-subwoofer channels. That means that you can have active 3-way front, active 2-way front plus rear, front, rear, and center channel using our new up mixer in BitDrive 2.0. And that makes this amplifier able to manage a complete full range car audio system. Now, the third use case is what if you have a factory system with more than 12 channels? One example is the full-size Range Rover. There's a number of those out there with 17 channels. So what do you do there? Well, what I would do is use one of our AF Forza multi-channel amps, let's say the 12 channel, and then let's use the AFM 1.7 bit. And now we have up to 24 inputs that we can route any way we want. We'll add one multi-channel amp, let's say our 6-channel, and now we have 17 channels to amplify and spread the sound the way we need to with our speaker system. So the AFM 1.7 bit has the input adjustments you're used to. It has 12 EQ bands per input channel. Every one of those can be adjusted for into notch filters or shelf filters or all pass phase inverting filters. We have a delay buffer for each of the 12 channels. We have an electrical input RTA for each of the 12 channels. That allows us to get the factory signal exactly the way we need it. That's an industry-leading suite of features. Then we get to the output. We will have the features you're used to. We have output channels, EQ. We have a global EQ. And there's one thing about the EQ that may be surprising to you. Because this system only has 7 channels instead of the 14 that many of the AF Forza amplifiers support, we decided to put 31 bands of equalization on each output channel. So that's more than twice as many as the regular AF Forza amplifiers. So there's a lot of tunability there. Finally, the DRC AC controller, the upcoming DRC MP CAN controller, the Beacon smartphone app that works through the Beacon, the input card for the additional 4 channels, the F4 in, and the F2O that adds an additional digital input. All of these accessories are also compatible with the 1.7 bit. So you can use the existing ecosystem of external peripherals to get the functionality that you need from the system that has the 1.7 bit in it. I've used this amplifier. I've had it in my car for a while. It sounds great. And there's 2 more things that make it sound different than any other subwoofer amplifier. It has 2 functions that you'll really like. One of them is a bass EQ feature that can either be fixed or variable between 2 thresholds. And the other is a bass emphasis feature that gives you the sound of a larger subwoofer without requiring additional excursion from the subwoofer you have. So that one is something different than some of the bass processing you may have seen before that adds a lot of bass that isn't there. This one actually causes a smaller subwoofer to convincingly sound like a bigger speaker. So add all these things together, it's a really powerful package.
Now, Ken, I knew when I had asked you and challenged you to that question that you were going to come guns a-blazing, and you certainly have, no doubt. I have 2 questions for you. The first one being, why has this never been a thing before? What has changed in the market that this new monoblock amplifier, with all its added features with DSP and ins and outs, what does that satisfy? What is that demand that has required Electromedia to put in the resources to develop such a, for lack of a better term, monoblock on steroids? And the second part to that question is, this bass enhancement feature, I want to say, is kind of unique. Yes, there's a lot of different devices out there that will add bass where bass is lacking. But to take an existing subwoofer and make it sound bigger, I'd like to hear a little bit more on that as well. So those are my 2 questions for you.
Well, those are great questions, Ben. And as far as the first one goes, I think it's useful to talk about Audison as a brand for a moment, because Electromedia has a few different brands. And Audison has always been focused on extending the state of the art. So Audison, as a general rule, isn't looking at the market and trying to decide where to follow. It may sound a little bit pretentious. I don't mean it to be. But for many years, ever since our first DSP product, we've decided where we think the market should go, and we've wanted to set the pace. So this amplifier isn't something that you would have come up with by going around and having focus groups and taking polls. This is something that we looked at as a company and decided this is the right thing to do. It's a little bit more explanation. It requires a little bit more explanation because, as you notice, it has more in it than you would expect it to have. And so to make sure our dealers really get the benefit of all these technologies is part of my job. Now that we've made it, it's important for me to make sure that everybody knows all the things it's capable of doing. Now, to your second point, I'm going to go back a few hundred years, and I'm going to talk about when people in the 1500s went to church and listened to a big organ played by an organist. And sometimes that organist would go to a smaller church than they were used to, and there would be notes in what they wanted to play that wouldn't be able to be played by the smaller organ because, as it turns out, you need a bigger organ with bigger pipes to play lower bass notes. So organists figured out way back then that if you played the upper harmonics of the missing fundamental bass note, that people heard it and felt like they heard more bass than they actually did. And so this became a technique that was used by skilled organists hundreds of years ago at church. So there have been several different ways that this technology or this technique has been used. It's called the missing fundamental. And while some technologies try to guess what that missing fundamental was and then insert it, whether it should be there or not, what this technology does is it knows there's a missing fundamental and it will add in the harmonics just to the subwoofer to enhance the sound of the bass overall. It's very musical, and we think you'll like it.
Thank you again, Ken, for that explanation of what that circuitry does. And the last takeaway before we move on is the fact that now that I've heard Ken say it, think about all the times your customers already invested in that multi-channel amplifier, and now they want to level up for whatever reason. They want to add DSP, they want to add a mono amplifier. Well, you didn't have this option before. Audison has now made it an option. One chassis, DSP, and circuitry for bass enhancement and power. Something to think about that. Leave your comments on the link below. Okay, moving on to another amplifier that we definitely want to focus on today, because beyond the Forza lineup, there is another great sounding series of amplifiers from Audison called the SR series. In particular, our case study today will be the SR 6.600. Ken, what can you tell us about this one?
Well, we've had a few 6-channel amplifiers in the lineup in Audison's history, and the SR 6.600 is the newest one, and it has some technology that really surprised a lot of us when we first got a look at it. So let's take a look at it now. You can see that it matches the rest of the SR family of amplifiers in terms of height and width, but it's a little bit longer, and here's why it's a little bit longer. It's got 4 channels that are 85 watts by 4 into 4 ohms. And those channels are 2 ohm stable, just like you would expect. Then it has an additional 2 channels that they seem like they're only slightly more powerful. They're 115 watts by 2 into 4 ohms. But those last 2 channels are 1 ohm high current channels. That means that they will go up to 300 watts each into a 1 ohm load, and that means you can bridge those 2 channels together into a 2 ohm load for 600 watts. So this is impressive on a technical level. It's also impressive on a commercial level, because if a dealer wanted to stock this amplifier for both 5-channel and 6-channel applications, the filter set supports it. Underneath that beautiful Audison plate on top, there is a full adjustment settings for crossover filters, bass EQ, and signal routing. What I mean by signal routing is this amplifier can run all 6 channels off of 2 inputs, or 4 inputs, or 6 inputs. It has high-level speaker-level inputs with USS built in. So if you're using it in an OEM application, we won't have any muting of any upstream signals. Also, With this amplifier, we've got a couple of different use cases. You can run this 6-channel full range. You can run it 6-channel high passed. You can run it front and rear high passed plus 1 or 2 subs. You can use it front high pass with the ×10 switch for tweeter crossovers. The middle 2 channels can be band passed for mid ranges, and then the last 2 channels can run to 1 or 2 subwoofers. So if you don't have a DSP in the system, this amplifier has a lot of crossover filter handling and routing capability. It's also the first of the SR amplifiers to be high resolution certified by the Japan Audio Society. So it's a great sounding amp. It's very musical. It can handle bass. It can run an entire system. This is something that a lot of dealers have been very excited to get on their shelves.
Well, Ken, considering the power ratings that you just outlined on this new SR 6600, I can't help but think that this might just be an awesome companion amplifier for maybe a 3-way active set to go along with that AFM 1.7.
Well, you're absolutely correct. We've had a number of dealers have exactly the same thought. Now, we do make a 6-channel amp in the AF Forza Companion line, which is 135/6. So you can't go wrong. If you want everything to match cosmetically, you can use the AF Forza Companion. If you have one of these and you want to get the benefit of the high current channels, you can plug that in. You can choose whichever path you like.
Okay, so we spent some time talking about some new amplifier options from Audison. Now we're going to turn our attention to some speaker options. The first one is from the Prima lineup. So for those of you who know Audison, Prima is regarded as kind of the integrator series. Awesome fitment, pretty much every size that you're looking for, and really efficient to be able to perform well with deck power. But did you know there's a special product within that range that is specifically designed for amplifier power? Let's check out the APK 165P for power.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. These are one of my favorite sets of speakers, and I love telling people about them. So let me show you what makes them different. So here is the 6.5-inch woofer, here is the tweeter, and here is the split crossover. And the first thing we'll talk about is the woofer. Unlike the regular Prima 6.5s, you'll notice there is a half circle surround instead of an accordion surround. That's because this speaker was designed for greater excursion because it was designed to work with amplifiers. So to accommodate the greater excursion, we had to have a different surround for this speaker. That's the first visual cue. The second visual cue is that the dust cap is bigger. And that's because the voice coil is bigger. If you look at the speaker from the side, you'll also notice the top plate is thicker, the magnet is thicker, and the back plate is thicker. And all of that means we've got more excursion and we've got a bigger voice coil that provides that motion. You've got a cooling hole in the back to keep that voice coil cool. It's a bigger voice coil than the regular 165. The woofer's rated to 115 watts RMS. 330 watts peak. So this woofer, you can see it's a stamped frame, but like a lot of our stamped frames, it has contours built into the tool to make it a stiffer frame than stamp frames that aren't as well designed. Now, once you put this woofer in the door, you need to have a tweeter to go with it. And this tweeter, unlike some of the bigger tweeters from us, if you look at it from the side, you'll notice this tweeter is very shallow. The AP1P tweeter has better top-end performance than the AP1, but it doesn't play lower than the AP1. It really works best down to about 3,200 cycles, and that's because the engineers and R&D wanted this tweeter to be able to fit in OEM locations. They knew that if you went with a tweeter that was too deep with a chamber on the back, you would have trouble popping it into some factory locations that didn't have a budget for more comprehensive fabrication. So this tweeter does play higher than the AP1. I really like the way it sounds. Now, next to that, you see a couple of crossover modules that are slightly different than the ones you've seen in some of our other speakers. This allows you to put one crossover on the 6.5 and the other crossover on the tweeter, even if they're in different locations. And a good example for this would be like a Honda Passport or a Honda Pilot, where the 6.5 goes in the door and the tweeter is in a beautiful OEM location at the bottom of the A-pillar, angled. It's a really great factory location, but If the passive crossover was in one module, it would be more difficult to set this up. So this kit was really designed from the point of view of an installer. We don't have all the parts out there because they're really difficult to unpack. But the tweeter also comes with what's called the Anywhere Install Faceplate Kit, where there's different grills, different spacer rings, different adapters. I've used them to install this tweeter into different vehicles, and it really does speed up the time required to get the fitment you want. So this kit here is what you want to use when you're using any of the AF Forza or SR series. If you can get it, this is going to give you better power handling, better low-end extension compared to the standard Prima kit, which can run without an amplifier on deck power. This one, I really would want to use this one with an amp. That's what the P stands for, power.
All right, Ken, thank you for the clarification with the P. So, hey, if you're looking for a nice integration type solution, but want to improve the performance by adding some power, definitely take a look at the APK 165P component set versus the standard Prima set. Now, on that note, and the key term you said there, Ken, was OEM integration. This next size, for me, it just keeps on popping up. There are so many applications for this than before. Of course, Audison was ahead of the curve, and there's a solution because this smaller little speaker, well, it's cute, but it packs a punch.
Yeah, this is a category of speaker that's not that intuitive for a lot of people. The widebander speaker, some people think that it only exists because the factory systems come with that size hole, and that's not really why it exists. The point behind the speaker, and let's take a look at it, and I'll show you a couple of things. You can see the picture on the box here. It's a small speaker. It's got a neodymium magnet. It'll fit in a lot of locations. And you can see how glossy the cone is in real life. That cone is made of aluminum. The dust cap is made of aluminum. Don't poke it with your finger. It's really hard to get the dent out. I'll tell you that right now. But the combination of that aluminum cone and the inductance ring that's in the motor design, and that inductance ring is what we use in Thesis. It's what we use in some of our other speakers and other brands, but no other Prima speaker has an inductance management or Faraday shorting ring except the AP2 MV. And that is what allows the speaker to get to 20K. Even if you don't have a tweeter, this is designed as a speaker that can be used without a tweeter if you need, and it will use the factory crossover point. I'll use as an example a 2014 and up Silverado with Bose. There's a speaker this size in the dash, and it plays down to usually around 200 hertz. Obviously, if you took that speaker out and put a tweeter in there, it would blow up. Can't play down to 200 hertz. So what a lot of people try to do is sum the channels back together, which can be very treacherous if you're not skilled or if you don't have the right equipment, and then use a 6 and a tweeter because 6s and tweeters are popular and they have a lot of them in stock. If you use an AP2 instead of a tweeter, now it can use the factory crossover point. Now it can play as low as the factory speaker. And there's a really important side effect that you probably haven't thought of. If you try to sum these channels together and you don't use the right equipment, like an AF Forza, to put these channels back in phase before you sum them together, they're going to cancel out where they overlap. And when they cancel out when they overlap, the music gets quieter. What do when the music's too quiet? We turn up the gain on the amplifier. And then the first time you open the truck door, the chime rips your head off because the chime isn't in both speakers. It's only in the dash speakers. And when you sum the channels together, there's no cancellation effect on the chime tone. So this happens more often than you would think. We see it as a frequent question from dealers. And the answer is don't sum. Use a speaker that can handle the OEM crossover point, like this one. And in another application, you can use this driver as a mid-range together with the APK 165P in a fully active three-way setup. We don't have passive crossovers for it, but we do have multi-channel amplifiers. And I have in our Subaru Outback, I have an APK 165P woofer and tweeter and an AP2 mid-range three-way fully active set, and it sounds amazing.
Ken, that's a brilliant example with the Bose system, and I love it when you said that chime will literally rip your face off, and it does. I've heard it. So, I remember you telling me one time about using this specific driver in a two-seat car. How did that work out?
Well, one of our cars is a 2014 Toyota FJ Cruiser, and the FJ Cruiser has this class of speaker, a wideband speaker, in each corner of the dashboard. So if you think about it, both of those speakers are off axis. So they're going to sound pretty similar. And they're both fairly far from us. So one isn't too much louder than the other. So I was able to use these speakers along with our 6x9 woofer in the door to create a two-seat tune along the lines of what Bose does in the Silverado, where I made sure that the left and the right sounded pretty similar. And then I was able to tune the system to sound equally good in both front seats. I actually ended up installing a button so that I can switch between the two for demonstrations. And what I've found is a lot of dealers want to do a two-seat tune, but they've already installed tweeters in the pillars. Once you install tweeters in the pillars, it's basically impossible to get a good two-seat tune without a center speaker. But if you've got a car with widebanders in the dash facing up, an AP2 is an excellent tool if you want to offer a two-seat option to your customer.
And that was Audison's Ken Ward joining us to talk about some exciting new products coming to you from Audison. If you want more information on any of the products covered on today's show, such as the new AFM 1.7-bit monoblock that we're getting a lot of comments on, or even the new SR 6600 or the Prima speakers discussed, make sure you head on over to the official Audison site. And if you happen to be a dealer tuning in from Canada, make sure to reach out to the folks at Automobility, as they are the distribution partner for all things Audison north of the border. Now, my takeaway from this is Audison is taking charge. I mean, these guys have been putting some real foresight into development of new product. When I first heard about this monoblock amplifier loaded with these DSP features, I was a little bit puzzled until I realized the application. More and more DSP is playing a role in our systems, not by choice, but because we have to. And we want to optimize the budgets of our customers. I think the example of having customers with existing multi-channel amplifiers that need to upgrade or want to upgrade or want to maybe swap that same amplifier into a newer vehicle, this mono amplifier simply does things that no other amplifier does. So, Ken, congrats. You definitely backed up your claim, and we will quote you on it. Yep, most features full set monoblock amplifier on the planet. There it is. I said it. That's it for this CMA Connected, brought to you by Sirius XM. I'm your host, Ben Wu. Until next time, we connect.